you have done for me, things so undeserved, yet you give to prove your love for me. The voices of a million angels could not express my gratitude. All that I am and ever hope to be, I owe it all to thee. To God be the glory, to God be the glory, to God be the glory for the things He has done. With His blood He has saved me, with His power He has raised me. To God be the glory for the things He has done. Just let me live my life, let it be pleasing, Lord, to Thee. And should I gain any praise, let it go to Calvary. To God be the glory, to God be the glory, to God be the glory for the things He has done. With His blood He has saved me, with His power He has raised me. To God be the glory for the things He has done.
All right. Because I was getting ready to go in the Army and said, who needs a job, right, before they're about to go in the Army. And I had this credit card. Now, the disappointing thing was I only had about $400 in the bank, which isn't very much to live off of and isn't very much to do. But I went and I had my girlfriend at the time, and we went out. I said, you know what, I'm getting ready to leave. And turn on my microphone. There we go. Good now? All right. Well, I'm Jason once again. So anyway, I got this great advice to apply for this credit card, and I only had about $400 in the bank, and I wanted to take my girlfriend out to eat. I was getting ready to leave for the Army, wanted to treat her nice, so we went out to the nicest restaurant I could think of, Taco Bell, right? I kid you. We went to the Olive Garden. I went to the Olive Garden, we sat down, we got about $50 worth of food, and I said to myself, I really don't want to spend $50 out of my bank account, so I used the credit card, charged it up, and I noticed later on in that day when I went and checked my bank account, I still had the $400 or $500, whatever it was, in my bank account. And I was stoked. I was like, this is all right. Then I needed new tires for my car, which is like $700. And so I went out over to the tire shop, and I didn't have, the $700 in the bank, but I had that credit card. And I went down and charged it up, and I looked back in my bank account, and there was still $700, or there was still the $400, $500 in that bank account. I was excited. I was like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Whoever invented this little plastic piece of goodness, it's just great. And so I'm charging up all of these things, and it's a wonderful thing until the end of the month when I get this bill. And the bill was something like $1,400. And I was like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to pay for this? Like I have no money. And then I looked, and it said, you can make your minimum payment. And the minimum payment was something just ridiculous, like $50 or something, $100. So I was like, this is great. So I went ahead and made the minimum payment, and it was great. There was a little something I missed about, like the 18-20% interest on that. And so before long, I found myself in a substantial debt. I found myself, like most of us find ourselves, in over our heads financially. And so tonight we're going to talk about common sense. We're going to talk about dollars and cents. I grew up kind of in a middle-class home, if you will. We weren't poor. We had everything we needed, but we still, we weren't all that well off. We weren't like my friends down the road. They were poor. I don't know if y'all have ever met people like that, where they just struggle financially. They're pinching every penny. Like you don't want to go over their house to eat because the ketchup is half filled with water. You know what I'm talking about? When it runs down, they fill it back up and, try to make it, into, a full bottle again. Same thing with the milk. The milk is half empty and it's filled up with water. They were poor. And, I think that we tend to fall into these kind of extremes when it comes to finances. We fall into these pitfalls when it comes to managing our money, regardless whether we grew up poor or whether we grew up in a middle class family. The one extreme is to pinch every penny, and you really don't want to be married to those people because those are the fights. Right? It's just, you can't do that. You can't pinch in every little penny. That's one extreme. And then the other extreme is, you just are out buying everything because you may have grown up in a lower middle class family or poor, and you want to go ahead and provide and give things that you didn't have. And generally, there's conflict in the marriage in that as well, right? Because the penny pincher and the penny pincher and the spender, they usually get attracted to one another, and that's usually what causes a majority of fights. But anyway, we're talking about finances tonight, and there's over 2,500 verses throughout both New and Old Testament that talk about finances. And so tonight, I want to share with you three things about finances. Three things about finances. The first is our part concerning finances. The second, we're going to talk about pitfalls. And then lastly, we'll talk about the purpose of finances. And so we need to understand, the first thing we need to understand is our part. One of the most important things that we need to understand about finances is that we are not owners of the monies, okay? We are not owners. The Bible tells us that we are administrators or stewards. We are simply stewards or administrators of our monies. Now, listen to this passage here. I want you to really absorb it and really take it in because we're going to come back to it a few times. Here in Luke chapter 14 and verse 28. 4 principles of becoming a good steward. Luke 14, verse 28. Notice here what the Bible says. Supposing that one of you wishes to build a tower, will he not first do what? Sit down and calculate the what? To see if he has enough money to what? To finish it. All right, I'll just read it one more time just so it sinks in. Supposing that one of you wishes to build a tower, will he not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough money to finish it? All right, so four principles of good administrators of our finances. The first thing that we need to do is to set clear what? To set clear goals. Notice in that short passage that we read, there's 4 principles there. The first one is we have to set clear goals. Looking at that passage, that man knew exactly what he was going to do. Okay, he wanted to be a builder. Okay, he wanted to be a builder. He didn't want to be a pastor. He didn't want to be a teacher. He didn't want to be a tax collector. He wanted to be a builder. All right. We also learned that he wanted to be a specific kind of builder. He wanted to build something specific. What did that man want to build? He wanted to build a tower. He wanted to build a tower. He didn't want to build mansions. He didn't want to remodel bathrooms or anything like that. He didn't want to build a big cathedral. He wanted to build a tower. All right, and so his mentality was kind of not whatever happens or I'm just kind of going to float along here. But he had clear goals. And somebody once said, if we don't know where we're going, we've already arrived. And I can't seem to find a more true statement than that, because we just spin our wheels when we don't set clear goals. And you'll be amazed how many people just have no specific goals in mind, and they just kind of go along and just whatever happens, kind of, I call it riding the wave. Whatever happens. We're deal with it when we come. They live paycheck to paycheck, day to day, and at the end of the year, they find themselves in the same position they did at the beginning of the year because they have not set clear goals regarding their finances. And so the first thing we need to do in order to be good financial administrators of of the money which is entrusted to us, according to this passage, is that we need to set clear goals. We need to set clear goals. We need to have a plan. And if you have to kind of see where you want to be and make tangible steps in order to get there. Notice the passage also reveals to us that the builder first sat down. The builder first sat down, okay, which implies that there was some forethought there. There was some time there was some thinking involved in that. And so he first sits down. He's making a rational, well thought through decision. His decision is not based on emotion and it's not based on compulsion. He is thinking. Now, how many of you can walk into a mall and not buy anything? By a show of hands, how many people? Now, how many people just lied? No, there are people that can do that. But for a lot of us, my wife, she cannot walk into a mall and not buy something. I mean, it is one of those things. She is a compulsive buyer. And the reason a lot of us find ourselves in trouble is because we buy things that we don't need with money that we don't have in order to impress people that don't even like us. And so the second part about being a good administrator is that we need to think first. You can ask any car salesman out there, if they don't get you within the first 48 hours, the chances of you buying that car drop significantly. In fact, even below 1%. There are people who wake up on Sunday morning, they have no plan, they go out shopping, and they come back with a 60-inch TV, right? My wife will be like, hey, I'm going out to eat with the kids. I said, have fun, honey. She comes back with bags. And I'm like, what happened? She's like, I'm like, there's 80 pairs of socks in here. She's like, yeah, but it was buy 60, get 20 free. I couldn't pass it up. I was like, baby, I don't need that many socks. Compulsive buyers, I tell you, compulsive buyers. But this impulsive compulsion is killing us. Just because it's on sale doesn't mean you need to buy it, okay? All right, so we need to think first, not to be impulsive or compulsive. All right, and then the third thing is that we need to have a clear, well-defined budget. You need to set a budget, all right? Notice that passage in Luke. When he first sits down and he counts the cost, okay? He counted the cost to see if he had enough, right? To see if he had enough to finish it. Now, a budget is an instrument or a tool that we use to tell our money where to go instead of wondering where it went, all right? And it's estimated that less than 40% of Americans have a clear, well-defined budget. Now, you don't have to have a degree in accounting in order to have a budget. It's very simple, right? The secret to having a surplus of money is spending less than you make. It's really just that simple. But the problem is, many of us need to keep up with the Joneses, right? We need to keep up with our next door neighbors and all of that. But I'll just share with you something that a wise person once shared with me. The Joneses that we all try to keep up with, they're all B-R-O-K-E, broke, okay? They all have no money, all right? And so I would rather have less and be happy and able to sleep at night and not worrying about finances and worrying about, what happened to all my money, where's my next, where's the money's going to come from all of these things, rather than try to keep up, with everyone else. And so we need to find our purpose and our happiness apart from our possessions, apart from the material things, and we need to be content with what we have. And so far too often we keep buying and keep buying and we keep buying. There was a person who came to me one time and they told me, Pastor, I'm just in a lot of financial trouble right now. I need your help. And so we help out financially, monetarily, for the first time. But then after that, we want to give you tools in order to succeed. We don't want to just keep putting Band-Aids on the problem. And so, I sat down with this person and I was going to lay out a budget for them and, work through them and teach them how to budget and all of this sort of thing. And I said, okay, get your receipts together and a list of kind of all your expenses that you have for the month, and we'll go ahead and work through this budget. Okay, so she brings out all her expenses, and the first expense that they have is their rent. Their rent was $750, which wasn't bad. Right, they're making about $2,000 a month. They're paying about $750 in rent. It's not too bad. And so I was looking at some of the other purchases, though, right? They had this one purchase for $2,000. They had this one purchase, for $1,750. I remember that number. It was $1,750. And you know what it was for? It was for a set of knives. Kid you not, a set of knives for $1,750. Now, if I'm paying $1,750 for some knives, I'm telling you, it better come with a chef, okay? Because the knives I have work perfectly good at cutting up the things that I needed to cut up with. And so this salesperson, the person I was sitting down with, they said the salesperson came to me and said, it's $1,750, but you know what? The person was like, I don't have that kind of money. And so the salesperson was like, oh, no, it's okay. We have a payment plan. And so they get on this payment plan of only $50 a month. And so they're paying $50 a month for all of these knives. Then they had a vacuum cleaner, and it was some crazy vacuum cleaner, and it was another $70 a month for this vacuum cleaner. And then they had another payment plan for something else I forgot. And I'm thinking to myself, this is like death by paper cut, right? I mean, it's just little things that just keep adding up over time that are just draining their finances. And as I looked at their expenses, a lot of them were just like, they're just needless. I mean, you don't, when you're making $2,000 a month, you don't need to spend a whole paycheck on knives. It's just not smart. You know, I sat down with this other couple. Well, it was actually a single parent. I sit down with her, and she had 4 kids. She had 4 kids, bless her heart. And I mean, she's working part-time, overtime, and all the time, right, to provide for these kids. And my heart went out for her because she was working, right? But the thing was, like, all 4 of her kids, even the one as young as 7 years old, they all had a cell phone. A cell phone with, you know, unlimited data and all of this sort of thing. And I'm saying to myself, like, man, I can understand, like, you got to get in touch with your kids, but, you know, do they all need cell phones? Do they all need unlimited data? You know, don't they have pagers or something that shocks the kid, you know, when they go too far away or something? You know, I don't know. I mean, there's other alternatives, right? But here she is, you know, spending all of this money on 4 cell phones. You know, I'm like, can't you, you know, like limit your cell phone? No, we need all 4. And I'm like, okay, you know. And it's one of those things. You know, we have bought into this idea somewhere along the way that, you know, we kind of need to be like everyone else. If everyone else has a cell phone, you know, our kids have to have cell phones, and, you know, they all have to have cell phones. But the Bible says to be good administrators of our finances, we have to have a budget. We have to be smart about our money. We have to set clear goals. And so here's a budget. This is just something that I would suggest to you. It's not a hard-lined, well-defined thing, but this is just a hypothetical. You're making about $4,000 a month. I would suggest these percentages, all right? I would suggest about 30% for housing, 10% for food, 10% for charitable giving, and 10 to 15% for your savings, all right? That's kind of like the ideal where we fall into. For our housing, 30%, you say, man, that's like a good portion of my income, and I can afford something really nice. You look at that, it's about $1,200. You're like, man, I can get something, you know, all right for this amount. But your housing needs to include your other expenses, whether if that's property tax, if that's school tax, if that's upkeep, you know, electricity, you know, heating. Those sort of things should be included into your housing thing. 30% of that, so keep that in mind, which would drastically lower your rent and, you know, to compensate for the other expenses. About 10% for food. My family, we do a little bit higher than 10% for our charitable giving. We actually set aside, we do like a 10%, you know, tithe to the church, and we do offering as well. And then we also have like a help fund in our house to where our budget, we set aside, it's like 1% of our income, which comes out to like, you know, $5 or I don't know what it is, $5, $10 a month. And we set that aside and we put it in a help fund. And that way, if, you know, one of our friends, you know, need help or someone comes to us and they're like, hey, can you really help us out? We just pull from, you know, that fund, kind of like most churches have a help fund. We have that in our family as well. And then 10 to 15% for savings. You want to be putting something aside. And so that's just something to kind of whet your appetite on that. But like I said, you don't have to have a degree, you know, to set aside a budget. Figure out how much comes in and your expenses, and just kind of figure out where you need to be. One of the things I will say about a budget and my family is that when my wife and I were first married, finances were always a thing. I'm a penny pincher, okay, obviously, and she's the spender. But we would have these little kind of arguments about money and where it went and all of this. But the budget solved all of those issues because we made a covenant with each other saying, hey, this is where we're at. Do you agree to spend this much money a month? Yes. I agree to spend this much money a month. Yes. And we don't fight over finances because we made that agreement amongst one another. And so we're good to go. So when she comes back with the 80 pairs of socks, I don't feel bad because she's still within the budget and it's all good. And so we don't have to fight over those things. What she spends her, you know, her part of the budget on, that's cool. And what I spend mine on, that's cool. And we meet in the middle, financially happy. All right, budget. All right. And so the first thing is to set clear goals, think first, set a budget, and the last one is to persevere. The last one is to persevere. There are some here tonight that are struggling and that are absolutely drowning in debt. If you want to be free from debt, it's a lot like losing weight, okay? We talked about this the first night, right? I mean, you can work so hard at that gym all week long. You got the sweatsuit on, you know, you're eating your Weight Watchers meals, you know, everything. You're eating the salad, you're disciplining yourself, and you're just working so hard, right? Step on that scale and you lose, you know, half a pound. My goodness. Then you go to potluck, fellowship meal, you know, at church later on, and you eat a little slice of cheese, and it's game over. You step on that scale, you gain 6 pounds. You know, you don't understand. How does that happen? And it's a lot like, getting in debt is a lot like, is a lot like gaining weight. It's a lot easier to get in debt or to gain weight than it is to lose weight. The kind of bad part about getting out of debt is it's hard. But the good news is it's not impossible. The good news is that there's hope for getting out of debt, and there's hope for you to be financially independent and financially free, and it's possible it's possible to get out of debt there. So the best thing that you could have done was to get out of debt years ago, right? The best thing for you would have been to set a budget and set clear goals and to do that years ago. But the next best thing for you to do is to start right tonight and to get your finances right. The Bible says that you are not an owner, but you are simply a steward or an administrator of your finances. All right? And stewards and good administrators set clear goals. They think first. And they set budgets, and they persevere. It's hard to stick to the budget. It's hard to do these things, but continue to persevere, continue to do it, and the Lord will reward you in the end. All right. Second thing we want to learn about finances tonight is we want to be careful about the pitfalls concerning money. We want to be careful about the pitfalls of finances. And so Job tells us something interesting about these pitfalls. In Job 36, verse 18, he says, "But watch out, or you may be," what's that word? "You may be seduced by wealth. Don't let yourself be bribed into sin." And so the first pitfall we want to avoid is not to be what? Not to be seduced. Not to be seduced. And, you know, I think women fall into this category more than men. I'm not saying men don't, because we do. But more often than not, it's generally women. You know, when you walk into a mall and it's like, I love those shoes. I just have to have those shoes, right? Like men, we're kind of more practical in some respects. Like we don't necessarily fall in love with things. Most of us are, looking at the price tag over like the beautiful color. But my wife I love those shoes, I gotta have, those shoes. But, I go in her closet and she has 50 pairs of shoes already. And, she's like, I have nothing to wear. And, I'm just saying, baby, you got all these clothes here. But she's like, I just love this thing. I have to have it. Seduced. She's watching online. Seduced by wealth, right? Seduced by these material things, right? When you go out and people are waiting on you and all of this sort of thing. I promise you, they don't care if you wore the same shoes, 2 nights or 3 nights in a row. They don't care. I'm just saying, as much as you think like it matters, it's okay. All right, don't be seduced into wealth. So how do you know if you've been seduced by money? How do you know if you've been seduced by that? Well, there's a few things a few questions that we have to ask ourselves. Do you neglect your family over money? All right. Do you place your job and your earnings and earning a living above everything else? What is the first thing you think of when you wake up, and what is the last thing you think of before going to bed? Do you think about work and finances when you're praying or when you're at church? Do you choose your occupation based on what you can earn? All right? Think about this, 70% of people in North America hate or are extremely dissatisfied with their job, with what they do for a living, with what they will do for the majority of their lifetime. And I think the reason a lot of people are dissatisfied with their job is because they chose the paycheck over their purpose. Right? They chose the paycheck over really what they had a passion to do. You know, they say there's an old saying: if you love what you do, you never work another day in your life. Isn't that true? And it's true. If you love what you do, you never work another day of your life. When I was in the Army, I was sitting down with the career counselor before I was signing the contract and all of that, and he made I was going in for 4 years. And he said, listen, there's a $12,000 signing bonus when you go in for 4 years. And I said, oh, this is great, because this is all my credit card debt, like, out the window. I'm like, this is awesome. And he said, but, you know, if you sign up for 5 years, it's $16,000. And I'm thinking to myself, man, that's a pretty darn good deal. I'm going to take that. And so I did. I took the 5-year deal for $16,000, which is, if anyone's good at math, how much more is that? 12,000 to 16. How much more is it? It's $4,000. $4,000. I tell you, from the time I went into basic training to the time I got out of the Army, every single day, I kid you not, if it wasn't every single day, it was every second of the day, where I was thinking, 5 years I signed up for. 5 years. What was I thinking? And I made the decision solely based on money. And it was the worst decision I ever made. And I said from that point on, sometimes you have to learn a hard lesson. That was a hard lesson for me to learn. But never again I will make the decision, never again to choose the paycheck over what I have a passion for. That's why I'm a pastor. I kid you, they take care of us well. But don't be seduced by wealth. Don't be seduced by wealth, right? You can't love something that has no ability, to love you. And so don't be seduced by wealth. The second thing is, don't put your trust in finances, okay? Don't put your trust in money. Notice here in Proverbs 11:28, those who trust in their what? Riches will fall, but the righteous will thrive like a green leaf. I can't tell you, like, my grandmother, she had a knack for just scaring us to death. Like, I'm like Naomi's age. I'm like 6 years old. Well, a little bit older than Naomi. I'm like 6 years old, and she's sitting here telling us these stories about the Great Depression, right? And how, like, her good friends, because after the stock market crashed, they committed suicide. And I would and it just sat with me for such a long time. I'm thinking, how is it that these people are killing themselves because they don't have any money? But it comes back to the fact that they put their trust in their wealth. And when that money dried up, there was like, okay, like, I have nothing to live for. I have nothing to give to my family because this is what they rely on me for. And so, now the only other option is for me to, end it all. Don't put your trust in finances, right? We are, we're not the owners of the money, Jesus is. And so you don't put your trust in it. Put your trust in Jesus. All right, here's the last one, but, one that we make the mistake all the time of doing this. I see it over and over and over again. A clear principle in the Bible. You can't pick and choose those things which you want to be in the Bible and those things which you don't want. One of the clear biblical principles is don't be a pledge for somebody else's what? Okay, don't be a pledge for someone else's debt. If we were to put that in modern terms, what would we say? Do not co-sign, right? Don't be a co-signer for somebody else. I can't tell you how much drama I have seen come into families because somebody has co-signed for another person's debt. It's a super common financial thing that people do that causes a whole bunch of drama. Notice here Proverbs 22, 26, and 27.
Don't be a pledge for another's debt. Do not be a man, don't be a man who strikes hands in a pledge or puts up security for debts. If you lack the means to pay, your very bed will be snatched from under you. Now, I don't know how many times, people have asked me to co-sign for a loan, and it's generally have been, people who have been close to me, good friends of mine, family members, and so forth. But I want to be very clear. It's not a point of pride or anything like that. But I worked extremely difficult. My wife and myself worked extremely difficult to get our credit scores to where they are at 812, okay? And I'm not going to have my good credit score, be burnt by a bad decision for you not being able to pay your debt. And I'm just going to put that out flat. And that's how it was kind of told to me when I was little as well. My dad, I was 16 years old. I'd been working at this fantastic job for about 2 years. It was Burger King. Now, Burger King just knows how to take care of their employees at $5.50 an hour. Let me tell you something about that. And so I worked hard all those 2 years in school and all of this to get enough money to save up for a car. I had $8,000 saved up for this car. And the car that I wanted was a Ford Mustang. Had my eye on this 1996 Ford Mustang GT, just beautiful car, right? 5-speed manual, and it was $8,000. And I said, well, this is great, right in my price range. But there was this really sweet limited edition Mustang. It was called the Bullet Mustang. And the thing was right there for the grabbing at $18,000. And I said to my dad, I said, listen, Pop, I worked really hard to get this $8,000 over 2 years. I know you see how much money I make. You see how much is coming in. I'll be able to pay you off at this time. And he's like, no. He basically told you the same thing that I told you earlier. I worked hard for my credit score, and you're not going to ruin it. But I'm like, Dad, look here. I just need you to do this. And, we're just take out a loan. And the good news is you can just co-sign for it. And he's like, not happening, right? And I was like, oh, Dad, you're so unfair, man. You don't understand. Anyway, he's like, no. And he stuck to it. And so I got stuck with this 1996 Ford Mustang GT. And anyway, yeah. But it was a cool car anyway. The police loved that car, by the way, especially at 16 years old. But here's the interesting thing, and I kid you not. After I bought that car, it was 5 months later that I ended up slicing my finger at work at Burger King, and I cut all the tendons and all this stuff, and I wasn't able to work. And Burger King, being the great employer, like I said, they didn't give me any workman's comp, nothing. They gave me my last paycheck, and they were like, oh, there, have fun. So I had no monies coming in. And so if my dad would have, taken up that loan, co-signed for that loan, guess who would have been on the hook for that? Him. And I'd probably still be hearing it to this day. Remember that car that I bought? He'd probably be driving around the Mustang anyway, and I'd be pretty upset about it. But regardless of the fact, you don't know what the future holds for the individual that you co-signed for, and so it's wise to follow the Bible's counsel on this, and don't be a pledge for somebody else's debt. All right. So number one, we saw that we are just simply administrators of our finances. Right. God has given it to us, and it's up to us to wisely use it. Number two, we looked at the pitfalls, right? And now, lastly, we'll look at the purpose of money. We'll understand the purposes of money, all right? And so why did God create money? There's a couple reasons that God creates money. The first thing we need to understand that money is neither moral or immoral. It is amoral, okay? Meaning that, some have said that the money is the root of all evil, right? But as correctly stated, it is not the money that is the problem. It is the love of money that is the root of all evil. Money is, as we talked about before, it is amoral. It's like a brick. You can use it to build a house, right? Or you can use it to break a window, right? You can use a car to drive from point A to point B, or you can use a car to drive into the side of a building. Okay, the car is not bad. It's the person who's behind the wheel, or it's the person who has the brick in their hand. And so, likewise, money is not necessarily evil, right? If money doesn't necessarily change people, okay? Money doesn't change people. It simply amplifies the traits that are already there. And so if you are a very generous person, the more money you have, you're generally going to be a more generous person. You have more of money at your disposal, and so you're going to go ahead and give that away more freely. But if you're, a very, a prideful person, when you get more money, that pride is going to be amplified. And the money reveals, that thing. The more that you have, it amplifies those traits. Money doesn't change character; it reveals it. And so, why did God create money? The first reason God creates money is in order for it to be saved. In order for it to be saved. Notice here in Proverbs 21:20, the wise do what? They store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. All right? God created money to be saved. All right? God also created money to be when we save, we do three things. We are preparing for the unexpected. We're making sure our children will have a better chance for success, and we're obeying what the Bible commands. All right? Secondly, it should be invested. Ecclesiastes 11:2 says, "But divide your investments among many places. Diversify. For you do not know what risks might lie ahead." So the Bible talks about investing. Now, I'll share with you a couple investments that I would say are wise. I'm not a financial person, and I am not in any way responsible for the decisions or investments that you make. I'll just put that out there. Right? But I do not invest in the stock market at all. Right? If it was up to me, whatever my employer contributed into that, I would take out and I would keep it for myself. Because to be very clear with you, I have no idea what a good stock is, what a bad stock is, what a good mutual fund is. I have no idea. And so I'm giving my money to a perfect stranger to go ahead and do what he's going to do with it. I don't think so. For me, it's just being a bad administrator, in my mind's eye, because I have no idea who this Joe is over here doing with my money. And so I don't trust my money into financial people or into the stock market. What I'm investing in right now, I'll tell you, is my wife's education. Education is always a very wise investment because generally speaking, you're going to get a really good return on that investment. Another thing I like to invest in like hard assets, right? In like tangible things, in property, in land. And I also like to do like startups. Like I like to invest in people and in their ideas, because investing in people, you can't go wrong. And so those are the things that I kind of invest in. I avoid the stock market and all that. Of course, we all have mixed opinions on where a wise investment is. But those are just some things that I do and that I have found